He rose to power during one of Europe's most turbulent periods, shaping events with strategies that surprised the world. But how did his tactical choices, which initially seemed brilliant, lead to one of history's largest military failures? After World War I, Germany faced defeat, political chaos, and economic hardship. Amid this turmoil, one leader studied history, psychology, and perception, understanding that influence and strategy could be as powerful as sheer force. Even before battles began, he engaged in a war of minds, shaping public opinion and political momentum. This was a new kind of warfare, one that began not on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of the people, exploiting anxieties and promising a return to greatness. He recognized that controlling the narrative was the first step to controlling the continent. In the 1930s, Germany began a rapid and secret military buildup, defying international treaties. New technologies, tanks, aircraft, and advanced communication systems were not just added to the arsenal, they were integrated into a revolutionary military doctrine. German generals, with this new hardware at their disposal, developed tactics that would become known as blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The core principle was simple yet devastating: emphasize speed and coordination over the grinding, attritional warfare of the past. It was about achieving a decisive victory before the enemy could even fully mobilize, a strategy designed for a nation that believed it couldn't afford a long war. Blitzkrieg relied on a symphony of rapid movement, close coordination, and overwhelming surprise. Panzer divisions, the armored spearheads, would break through weak points in the enemy's defenses, driving deep into their rear. They weren't meant to fight every defender, but to bypass strong points, sow chaos, and sever lines of communication and supply. Above them, dive bombers acted as flying artillery, terrorizing defenders and clearing the path for the tanks. Finally, motorized infantry would follow, securing the territory the panzers had just raced through. The early campaigns in Poland, France, and the Low Countries showed its remarkable effectiveness. The sheer speed was psychologically shattering, paralyzing enemy leadership and causing entire armies to collapse in weeks, not years. However, this string of breathtaking successes also planted a dangerous seed: overconfidence. The planners began to believe their own myth, assuming that speed and audacity could overcome any obstacle, a belief that would soon be tested against harsher realities. Initially, the German leadership demonstrated a masterful grasp of planning and deception. Operations were meticulously timed, and enemies were often misled about where the main blows would fall. This calculated approach kept opponents off balance and amplified the effects of blitzkrieg. However, as victories mounted, a subtle but critical shift occurred. The leader began to rely more on his own intuition, dismissing the cautious advice of his experienced generals. Early successes created a dangerous illusion of infallibility, a potent bias that convinces a decision-maker their gut feeling is a substitute for sound, structured planning. This is a timeless lesson. Even the most well-conceived strategies are brittle if they aren't constantly challenged, refined, and adapted with humility and an open mind. Confidence is an asset, but overconfidence is a blindfold. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. It was the largest land invasion in history, a colossal gamble intended to win the war in a single campaign. The plan, however, was fundamentally flawed. It grossly underestimated the vastness of the Soviet territory, the brutal climate, and the immense logistical challenges that came with it. German planners expected a swift collapse, just as they had seen in France. But the Soviet Union was different. It absorbed the initial blows, trading space for time. As the German army pushed deeper, its supply lines stretched to the breaking point. Autumn rains turned roads into impassable mud, and then the infamous Russian winter arrived. Progress ground to a halt as engines froze and soldiers suffered in the extreme cold. What began as a strategy of rapid, decisive maneuver devolved into a grueling war of attrition, the very kind of conflict blitzkrieg was designed to avoid. The geography itself had become a weapon. By 1942, With the war turning against Germany on the Eastern Front, the nature of its leadership changed dramatically. Decision-making became increasingly centralized in the hands of one man. Strategic flexibility vanished. The generals who had pioneered blitzkrieg found their expertise ignored, their warnings dismissed. Decisions were no longer driven by sound military logic, but were increasingly shaped by rigid ideology, personal pride, and a stubborn refusal to admit any mistake. When the Sixth Army was encircled at Stalingrad, practical military advice called for a breakout. Instead, an order came to stand and fight to the last man, a decision rooted in political symbolism rather than strategic sense. This tragic episode highlights a critical leadership principle. A strong leader must balance their own vision with the counsel of experts and possess the humility to adapt plans when reality proves them wrong. Without that balance, vision becomes delusion. By 1943, Germany was caught in a multi-front war it could not win. The strain on its resources, manpower, and industrial capacity was immense. Strategic reserves were depleted, and the constant need to plug gaps on multiple fronts prevented any coherent, long-term planning. Decision-making became reactive and desperate, often clinging to rigid, outdated ideas rather than reflecting on the new strategic reality. The failure to evacuate seasoned troops from North Africa, the costly and pointless defense of Italy, and the disastrous counter-offensives on the Eastern Front were not just tactical errors. They were symptoms of a complete strategic collapse. They underlined the profound danger of pursuing a strategy without continuous, honest evaluation. Strategy is not a fixed blueprint. It is a dynamic process of reflection and adaptation. Without it, even the most brilliant beginnings lead to ruin. The history of this conflict teaches us that tactical brilliance and intelligence are not enough to secure lasting success. Virtues like patience, humility, and the self-awareness to recognize one's own limitations are just as crucial, if not more so. The early, dazzling victories, if not tempered with a sober understanding of risk and a willingness to adapt, can become the very source of ultimate failure. They can breed an arrogance that blinds leaders to changing circumstances and deafens them to wise counsel. The story serves as a powerful reminder that in any high-stakes endeavor, whether in war or in peace, victory is not an endpoint but a moment that demands even greater reflection and caution. This analysis is not about glorifying conflict, but about understanding the timeless patterns of human ambition, strategy, and decision-making. It shows us how quickly brilliance can curdle into folly without the guiding hand of wisdom. Tactical skill can achieve stunning victories, but it is wisdom, humility, and self-awareness that ensure sustainable, long-term success. Brilliance can win battles, but wisdom wins wars. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. If you find these explorations of strategy and leadership valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel for more documentaries that delve into the pivotal decisions that have shaped our world. We'll see you in the next one.